Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has delivered the first budget of the NDA 3.0 government. The focus once again was on the poor, the farmers, the youth of the country and also the middle class. How has the Finance Minister fared when it comes to increasing the manufacturing footprint of the country, exports, trade facilitation? Joining us to talk about this all is a stellar industry panel. We've got veterans with us from the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Joining us is Dr Sangita Reddy, Mentor, FICCI Committee on Medical Value Travel and Women Empowerment. Also, the past president of FICCI and joint managing director of Apollo Hospitals, Subhrakant Panda, immediate past president of FICCI and managing director, Indian Metals and Ferro Alloys, Rajan Bharti Middle, past president FICCI and vice chairman of Bharti Enterprises, Sandeep Somany, chair FICCI Task Force on Ease of Doing Business and also managing director of the Somany Group, past president of FICCI as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Reddy, if I can begin first with you. How do you think this budget does when it comes to unleashing the animal spirits of the economy? The economic survey had said that it's now important for the private sector to invest more. This is where we've been lagging. Also, in terms of job creation, it is only the private sector which can create those jobs for the future. Today, we've heard of 3 schemes for generating employment, incentives, something that the industry had been asking for, ELIs, that has been announced. How do you see the government's push towards manufacturing and making India a manufacturing hub for the world?
So I think overall, Parikshit, we're looking at a good budget. It's a budget that promises continuity. There's a surety. There's an ability to look at every critical segment, from agriculture to youth to employment generation, critical manufacturing, and each one of these have a complementary effect on each other. There is an underlying messaging of rationalization of the tax regime. There's a simplification. There's an enhancement of productivity. So I think it ticks many boxes, and therefore, as corporate India, we should all say, yes, we're happy we're on the road to success. We acknowledge being the fastest growing economy with great headrooms for growth. And this budget will enable that growth in many forms. There is, of course, the underlying aspects of what was announced earlier on research and innovation. We appreciate those points. There is the focus on women, which I must call out, and that's significant. So overall, I would say as an opening statement, this is a budget of continuity. It's comprehensive in its approach, and it does have the ability to encourage and make the middle class enthusiastic. Approximately up to 17,500 rupees going into their hands will fuel consumerism, which will then assist manufacturing. And of course, infra has the continued push.
Right.
So many ticks.
All right. When it comes to infrastructure, Mr. Somany, the announcement that was made in the interim budget, the government has been in line with that. There is no change in the infrastructure capex per se. There was a demand from the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry to increase that outlay. So is there some amount of disappointment on that front?
No, I don't think so. You know, the Honorable Finance Minister laid out a roadmap some years ago, and she's sticking to that roadmap. They have been spending a lot of infrastructure. In fact, the government has been front-ending capex over the last few years, if you know. And frankly, they are continuing to spend on infrastructure. There's a lot of thrust on rural infrastructure. There's also a lot of thrust on urban infrastructure. Of course, there are partnerships with the state, and the states also have to, put in a certain amount of capex to improve their respective infrastructures. I think if you look at the statement of the Finance Minister, it's very clear that the continued focus on infrastructure remains and is here to stay. So I think that's a positive move, and I think it's not a one-off move. It will continue to be the focus in the next few budgets too.
Right. Mr. Panda, if I were to ask you about the focus on critical minerals. So there are 25 critical minerals which will be exempted from duties altogether. This is to push manufacturing of niche technologies in the country. Does this give an impetus, so to say, to industries like yours?
So, Parikshit, when we look at the manufacturing sector, there are clearly niche areas, like you said, which are very dependent upon these critical minerals. And barring one or two, India, unfortunately, as of now at least, doesn't have those resources, which means that we are reliant on imports. So, from that point of view, I think completely exempting the import duty on these 25 critical minerals is a good step forward. But I think what is also important to focus on is that the Honorable Finance Minister talked about a mission aimed at recycling these critical minerals, for secondary use, etc., as well as focusing on acquisitions abroad. In fact, FICCI had done a study on this last year, and clearly, when it comes to critical minerals, where a lot of our high-tech niche manufacturing is going to be reliant on these inputs, I think we need to do everything that we possibly can, and this is an important step towards ensuring that we sort of recycle the resources which are there for secondary use, do more exploration for any of these minerals which might be there in India, and of course look at acquiring assets abroad.
Right. Mr. Mittal, when it comes to telecom equipment, also mobile phones, the government has decided to increase the basic customs duty on specified telecom equipment from 10 to 15%. Now, this includes motherboards, PCBAs. This is to increase domestic manufacturing. When it comes to mobile phones, mobile phone chargers and certain components, the import duty has been slashed. How do you see these measures? We've been seeing some sort of impact on telecom stocks since morning, especially the increase in basic customs duty on certain telecom equipment. How do you see this?
I think we have to look this in two different ways. One is the telecom equipment, other is the mobile phones.
Right.
India is becoming now a second source of mobile phones, especially for domestic as well as exports. As you've seen, we've crossed the numbers which was not even expected, and I think it's in the right direction. The PLIs that have been set up for that, and we import a lot of electronics, as you're well aware. So I think it's a right move, especially in manufacturing, and which is actually, if we really kind of juxtapose it with the job creation, it's very important. India's growth story cannot be predicated only on services. So agriculture being one part, which is being talked about, manufacturing being the other. So electronic manufacturing, especially mobile phones, is being considered in that light. On the telecom equipment, we believe that telecom equipment also India can, in the future, become a source, global source for telecom equipment. And that's why it is being now pushed that the Indian manufacturers start doing the manufacturing internally. And we are seeing even the global giants are bringing the base for manufacturing in India, the Ericssons of the world, the Nokias of the world, and of course the Indian stack which is coming along. So I think it's been, I would say, a mixed bag, but kept in mind for a long term and a long future for this industry in particular.
Right. But any kind of suggestions, considering that we want to be a manufacturing hub in telecom, mobile phones, any further suggestions to the government on that front?
While manufacturing has been done, there is, which is attached to it, and we've always been asking the administrative ministry as well as the finance ministry, telecom per se being the lifeline today, being the digital public infrastructure that is being spoken about, telecom is its backbone. We believe that the telecom levies are far too high in this country. They need to be rationalized, and we hope in future that will come around so that the investment in the technologies of the telecom companies keeps happening, and we are abreast with the newer technologies of the world.
All right. Ms. Reddy, if I can come to you about healthcare specifically. No big bang announcement on healthcare, but yes, in terms of patients, 3 cancer medicines completely exempted from customs duty. Also, X-ray tubes and other parts of X-ray machines have also been exempted from customs duty. How do you see this push in the budget along with the 90,000 crore allocation for the healthcare sector? And this would be for continuing schemes of the government.
So thank you for adding that last line, Parikshit. I think at first look, everybody was slightly disappointed that health was not mentioned. But if you look at it in conjunction with the 90,568 crores, which was announced during the interim budget, which is an approximately over 10% increase in the healthcare budget, I think the trend of investing in healthcare and the ideology of enabling universal access to quality healthcare remains. The X-ray tube actually is significant because there are 1.5 lakh primary healthcare centers in the country. And one of FICCI's recommendations was really to focus on enhancing primary care in the country. So if we can manufacture X-rays, good quality machines in the country, this will enable a more comprehensive primary healthcare infrastructure. So there's a great value in that initiative. I also, think that healthcare people are the eternal optimists. So we will look to call upon the Research and Innovation Fund and see that a significant portion of that goes into health research, where the greater opportunities lie. The use of the concept of the public digital goods, the healthcare data is now a powerful tool which can unlock AI algorithms and therefore enhance our capability in population health. So the foundations have been laid of a new population health, a smarter preventive healthcare strategy, and therefore a healthier country. And finally, I think in the skilling and in the women's empowerment also lies, some silver lining for healthcare, because healthcare is one of the largest service sectors. Skilling is an important part of what we do, and a portion of the skilling budgeting and the employment generation will come into our sector. In addition to that, I think it's very critical for us to look at research. And so beyond the AI, this research is not just the primary research, but translational research of moving from bench to bedside in an accelerated manner and taking the advantage of a powerful pharmaceutical industry to not be a copier or a global manufacturer of generic drugs, but really to be an innovator and create new products. The foundation is laid. I'm positive about healthcare, and I still do look forward to the next budget in 7 months.
All right. But some misses, according to you, especially in the healthcare sector, something that you were really hoping for, and how do you think this budget will contribute to increasing the labor force participation of women across the economy?
So clearly there's significant areas. I'm happy to call out the Mudra loan scheme, which has been a very successful scheme. So taking Mudra from 10 lakh to 20 lakhs enhances that utilization. The working women's hostels, very important, because this enables women to come out of the rural areas, live in the large cities where the jobs are, and yet be safe, and their families feel secure about where they are. I also think the 3 lakh crore allocation for women and children will be effectively used towards more women empowerment. After all, the concept of women-led development remains a cornerstone of the budget.
On STTs, there was a tax increase. Yes, there was some amount of rationalization when it comes to short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains as well, but there was also an increase in certain classes. How do you see this? Because we've seen mixed reactions from the industry so far.
See, on the long-term capital gains, the capital gains has gone up by 2.5%, which is not very consequential. I mean, the stock exchanges in India have been doing very well, and I think the government is entitled to their fair share from the increased wealth of the people of the nation. On the short term, it's gone up from 15 to 20, and there was always a thought that, the difference between the short term and the long term was very small, at 5%. Now it's 7.5%. So I think it's a good move on the part of the government. Actually, I am told that in unlisted securities, the actual tax has actually come down from, if it's long-term, unlisted, it's come down from 20% to 12.5%. So that's positive for many unlisted companies. And there are many of them. A lot of the new generation companies in the new innovative areas are mostly unlisted. So that's a positive. STT, I think, again, as the economy grows, there will be more transactions, and I think the government takes a very small portion of that transaction, and that is quite fair.
Right.
In my opinion, it's not overburdening or taxing the people too much.
So, Mr. Panda, would you say that when it comes to demands on rationalizing the capital gains, the government has met you halfway?
I would certainly say that the government has met us halfway, because one of the key suggestions from FICCI, in as much as taxation was concerned, was to look at simplification. So whether it is in terms of the rationalization of TDS rates or even if you look at capital gains. Now, clearly our intention in terms of recommending a rationalization was, we didn't obviously plug the increase in rates, but we were certainly asking for removal of distinction between resident and non-resident, between different asset classes, between holding periods and all of that. So from that point of view, I think what you have ended up with, particularly in terms of capital gains, is a regime which is fairly clear, where it is 20% short-term capital gains for financial assets, and the rates continue to be what they were for other assets. And you have a fairly simplified long-term regimen, which is 12.5%. Yes, the rate is slightly higher, but as my friend Sandeep mentioned, it is not something that that I think one is going to waste a lot of time, agitating over that. I think the benefit that you have had in terms of a move towards greater simplification is definitely something that we welcome. I would say definitely halfway, if not a little bit more.
All right.
Parikshit, a quick one on the tax. There were two other recommendations among the long list that FICCI had given. One was, of course, the abolishment of the angel tax, which I think was significant, and the other one was the decriminalization of commercial offences. FICCI has been talking about this for a long time, and I think that trend is a very positive methodology of looking at it. Also, the underlying theme of certainty of tax regime. So all these three also must be called out.
Right. Now, when it comes to, Mr. Mittal, attracting more investments into the country, how do you think the finance minister has fared on different fronts? As Ms. Reddy was pointing out, there's ease of doing business. There are provisions of the tax laws which have been decriminalized. How do you see that? There's also corporate tax for foreign companies that has been reduced.
Yeah. I think, certainty is what the foreign investors look for in any country. I think continuity, stability, and least litigation. I think in this budget, at least what we heard the finance minister saying, is setting up that agenda. She talked about saying we want to bring the litigations at the lowest level. We need to sit across, and if we can bring their litigation, the biggest litigators between government and the private sector is always the case. And taxation has been reduced now for the foreign companies. So I think it's a great move. Even from Indian corporate point of view, I think it's a good move to say we want to bring the litigation at the lowest level. We want to decriminalize things because nobody wants disputes and litigations to go for eternity.
Is this now going to be appreciated abroad that the government has continued on the path of fiscal prudence, what it had started with the interim budget? It wants to continue on that path. This was also mentioned in the BJP manifesto. Do you think this is going to be seen in a positive light?
I 100% think it's a very good signal. I think there's no hiding the fact that India is the world's fastest growing economy, that in every sector you look, there's so much scope to do more, that we have a very powerful human resource advantage. And now with the employment generation scheme and the skilling scheme, this will be further channelized. So I continue to believe that India is the best place for multinational companies to come in, for foreign direct investment. And another important trend which will continue is the setting up of global competency centers. It's estimated that 50% of the world's GCCs will be in India, and I think that will, live out the prophecy, and will also be a further impetus on employment generation.
Right.
So all in all, this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
All right. On MSMEs, Mr. Somany, there have been announcements on the TREDS platform. There was an announcement on a credit guarantee scheme. How does this budget do in terms of aligning MSMEs in the country closer with global value chains, making them better in complying with global norms and increasing their exports?
So the TRED matter was a request that was made by FICCI, and it's been fulfilled by the government. I think if you look at the Honorable Finance Minister's speech, her thrust was in terms of modernizing the MSME sector, for which easier credits will be available without guarantees, and that's a big one, because we never could get credit without guarantees in India earlier. So that's a bold step, and I think her thrust is that people should go out, get the most modern equipment, whether from India or abroad, and make world-class products. And I think the MSME sector is a very important sector, is the backbone of employment in India, apart from agriculture. I think we have one of the largest SME and MSME sectors in the world. And I think employment creation is a matter of national importance. The MSMEs can, help towards creating more jobs, and any access to credit, affordable credit and easy access to credit are two things that are necessary for them to improve their quality of output and productivity. So I think this will go a long way in terms of making sure that they become much more world-class than what they are today.
On the employment-linked incentives, both CII and FICCI have been asking for ELIs for quite some time now. Does this completely meet the industry's recommendations, and will this actually lead to job creation? Because this had become a very strong issue over the past few months, and the government was also being questioned about job creation in the formal sector.
So, Parikshit,
and also skilled jobs. Okay.
So, Parikshit, these are two issues which we are conflating, and they are related, of course. So, first is, if you look at the PLI scheme, I think that's something that has done very well. The standout success, of course, being the personal electronics and mobile phones. But overall, I think PLI has done well with 1.28 lakh crores of investment, leading to about nearly 11 lakh crores of production and sales and 8.5 lakh jobs. So clearly, it is something that that has worked well. But I think, as a personally, my belief, and something that FICCI has also advocated, is that one needed to bring other elements into play as far as PLI is concerned. One being to bring in the component ecosystem, but let me leave that aside for a second. But also to use it as a means to drive employment, because that is something, when you look at the large number of young men and women coming into the workforce every year, that is something that we have to, as a nation, be focused on, to ensure that we are creating well-paying jobs and providing opportunities for them to to progress. So from that point of view, FICCI had talked about employment-linked incentive schemes, and employment being one of the factors that you look at when devising a PLI scheme. What has been included in the budget, I think, is another element of it which is also very interesting, which is a scheme for first-time employment and a scheme for subsidizing employment specifically in the manufacturing sector and as well as other sectors. I think this is important for the simple reason that we have the demographic dividend, right, but that demographic dividend is useful if you are able to provide opportunities to these young men and women, as I mentioned. And equally, I think there is an issue, in certain sectors, at least, where skilled manpower has been lacking. So I think through these sorts of measures, as well as the apprenticeship scheme, which sort of gives exposure to 1 crore youth to the top 500 companies of the country, I think that is, that starts that focus on employment and other things, which is an integral aspect of growth, because it's not just growth, it's sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and the inclusivity angle comes in from every section of society being part of this journey.